Alright, so today's goal is to review adding and subtracting rational expressions. This is on page 21. There are 4 independent practice problems at the top of page 21. We're just going to see if we can work through those in hopes for you to see a couple of extra examples so you feel a little more confident about the process of adding and subtracting rational expressions. Our first problem has a common denominator, so that's a problem where you go, yay, nothing to do, just add the top together. 15 over 3x. Now, if I look, it says perform the indicated operation and simplify. So simplifying this, 15 divided by 3 is 5. The x is still in the denominator. So 5 over x is simplified. That one's pretty straightforward. Problem number 2 looks a little more interesting. Anytime you see a fraction that's a rational expression, the first thing your brain should be thinking is factor first, whether you're simplifying just to simplify or in this case we're finding a common denominator. So the denominator needs factored. First one taking out a 2. The second one thinking about 3 is a -1 and a -3. We're making a -4 when we add them together. So a common denominator. Each different factor makes our common denominator. The one on the left has a 2 and an x minus 1. The one on the right also has an x minus 1, but that's part of our common denominator. It has an x minus 3 as well, so that would be the other part of our common denominator. So now that we know what the least common denominator is, we have to start applying it to the fractions that we currently have. So looking to see, we currently have 2 and x minus 1, but it doesn't have the x minus 3. So the piece that it's missing is the part that we need to multiply both numerator and denominator by. Now notice this numerator is x minus 3 and x plus 2. Those are both quantities that get multiplied together. So when you FOIL them, you end up with x squared minus x minus 6. The second fraction on the right has the x minus 1 and the x minus 3, but it doesn't have the 2. So we need to multiply by the 2, its missing part, multiply by the 2. So that, when you distribute, gives you 4x plus 2. So the last part here, we now actually have to do the addition because our denominators are the same. We applied that part to the numerator. So looking across the top of the fraction, adding your like terms, we have an x squared. And then we have a -x and a 4x, so that's positive 3x. And then there's a -6 plus 2, so that would be a -4. Alright, so we did the operation, but then it says simplify, and that's when we need to make one more little check step here and see, did we simplify? Well, I know this can be factored. We have a -4 in the numerator, and we're trying to make a positive 3, so a positive 4 and a -1 would work. So that top becomes x plus 4 and x minus 1. The bottom has a 2 with the x minus 1 and the x minus 3. So once things are factored, that's when we're allowed to simplify or cancel, reduce the current term that they have in common, and that would be x minus 1. So we're left with x plus 4. It had nothing in common with the denominator. It cannot cancel because the entire term needs to be the same as what's on the bottom. So x plus 4 divided by 2 and then x minus 3. So we perform the operation and now it's simplified. So looking at number 3 and trying to do the same exact thing, factor first, we have a 9 trying to make a 6. So x plus 3, x plus 3. Really, that means we have x plus 3 squared. The second one is x squared minus 9. That's that pattern, perfect square pattern. So x plus 3, x minus 3. So least common denominator. would be the different factors that are listed in your denominator, but also the largest power of those factors. And the largest power of x plus 3 is squared. And then looking at the second denominator, there is the x plus 3. Well, I don't need to write it again because it's already represented, but we need the x minus 3. So that's our least common denominator. The largest power of each factor. X plus 3 is squared because its largest power was 2, and then we have an x minus 3. So looking at our numerator on the left, we have the x plus 3, but not the x minus 3, so we need to apply that to the top. Again, that gets FOILed, so it's two quantities. I would make an x squared, a minus 2x, and a minus 3. The right side has one x plus 3 and an x minus 3, but it needs the other x plus 3. That gets distributed as 6x plus 18. So addition sign in the middle, and the numerator together, combining those like terms, x squared plus 4x plus 15. In the denominator, x plus 3 squared and x minus 3. So before you move on to the last problem, check, can the numerator be factored? If it can be factored, then you need to factor it. And we're looking at 15. Well, 15 is just 15 and 1 or 5 and 3. 5 and 3 can never combine together to be 4. So it cannot be factored, therefore you cannot simplify it. There's nothing that you can cancel because the numerator and denominator don't have the same quantities in common. So the final problem, number 4, again factor first. Our left side is just one term, it doesn't get factored, but the right side we can pull out a 4x, leaving us with 2x minus 3. So common denominator, I see a 4, they both have a 4. I see an x squared, the other one has an x. The largest power is x squared. And then looking on the right, there's also a 2x minus 3. So again, they both have a 4, they both have an x, but the one on the left has an x squared. And then we have a 2x minus 3. So the one on the left has the 4x squared, but not the 2x minus 3. So it needs 2x minus 3. If you distribute that, that gives us 16x minus 24. The one on the right has the 4. It has an x. It has a 2x minus 3. But it needs an x squared, so it needs another x. So that gives us 2x plus x squared. Alright, the last thing, we have the common denominator. We need to do a little bit of subtracting. Make sure that subtraction sign gets applied to both parts of that second fraction. You're subtracting that entire numerator. So we have a 16x minus a 2x. We have a negative 24. And then that minus goes with the x squared as well. And I'm going to place that in the front so that this is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So we have negative x squared plus 14x minus 24. The denominator is 4x squared and then 2x minus 3. Again, check to see if you can factor this. Break it down any further. If it's beneficial to break it down because it's going to cancel with something in the denominator, then we want to do so. In this case, there's a 2x minus 3 in the denominator. There isn't any way that we could try and get the numerator to have that same quantity so that it could cancel from the denominator. If you wanted to, you could factor out a negative to make it then positive x squared minus 14x plus 24. Again, this would just be an option. You wouldn't have to do this. And then I could factor it one more time. 24 is 2 and 12, and negative 2 and negative 12 combine to be negative 14. So I could also write my problem like that, where the numerator is factored, however it doesn't cancel with anything in the denominator. So either answer is fine. So hopefully that gives you a little review of finding common denominators. Today's homework is an adding and subtracting worksheet, adding and subtracting expressions. The first group of problems on the worksheet is simply just finding the least common denominator. So that worksheet is attached in Google Classroom right underneath this video. And again, the first 4 problems, you're just finding the least common denominator. And then after that, 5 through 11 asks you to perform the operation and simplify. You might need to do these problems on a separate piece of paper. I need to see work. You will be submitting this to me, and I will be grading it and looking at it. So just answers is not acceptable. Again, you're only doing numbers 1 through 11 on the worksheet. All of that is stated with the assignment in Google Classroom. Have a great day.